All right. Since we started yesterday with tefillah and it worked, so we'll try. We'll start with a little Pirkei Avos, so we'll see if that works. So we were in the first Mishnah of Pirkei Avos. We already discussed Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai and Masar Yeshua. Yeshua Zkanim Zkanim L'Nevim L'Nevim Masar L'Anshei Knesset Agdola. Haim Amru Shloisha Dvarim. The Anshei Knesset Agdola had three things that they established. Three things they said. Of course, they said much more than three things, but these three things were major. Havim asunim badin, that we already discussed. We said you have to be patient by din. We said it's brought down that when somebody comes and asks a shaila, you don't say, oh, that din came to us already 50 times. Cut the guy off and say, no. You have to treat each shail. You have to treat each shail with the same gravity as even if he's the 100th shail. You have to give him the same time, the same gravity. The next thing they said was, Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. You should raise up many, many, many Talmidim. Now, that's very interesting, because if you think about it, Pirkei Avos was not written just for Dayanim. Pirkei Avos was not written just for Magidei Shir. Pirkei Avos was written for everybody. So why are we addressing to everybody, Hamidu Talmidim Harbe? Not everybody is raising up Talmidim. So what's this for everybody? Hamid Talmidim Harbe. But the truth is that my Rebbe, Reb Reuven Zayin Gesund, said many times, it's not true. And he says, I'll show you that it's not true. Every one of us says in davening, V'ha ereneinu b'seirasecha, before that, Avinu avarachaman hamarachem rachem aleinu, we asked the Rabbanan Shalom for Rachmanus, V'sein b'libeinu bina, you should give us understanding, Lahavin, to understand, or lahaskil, to discern, lishmaya, to listen, lilmaid, to learn, or lalamed, and to teach. So every single one of us is saying in davening, we're asking the Rabbanan Shalom that the Rabbanan Shalom should give us the capacity to teach. So teaching is not only for the Rabbanim, it's not only for the Megidei Shir, it's not only for the Rosh Yeshiva, it's for every single one of us. And the truth is that every single one of us raises Talmidim in different ways. We're parents, we have children, we have grandchildren, should be Zaychish of great-grandchildren. So that's Talmidim. You're raising up and you're instructing Dairis. Also, even somebody who does not have children. You come to the Beis HaKnesses, you come to Shul, you daven, people see the way you daven, they learn from the way you daven, from the way you comport yourself. They see how you act, and they learn from that. I just heard today by Yeshua Brachas a beautiful story about Rebbe Feinstein Alad Shalom, where apparently, I never heard this before. I was surprised I never heard it. Apparently, she was in a little fender bender in a parking lot, and the other party to the incident were not the, shall we say, the finest people in the world. And they came out and they're screaming and yelling and talking in all sorts of ways that you could just imagine. And she stood there very calmly and she took all the abuse. And when they finished, she said, I'm so sorry. I really apologize, even though it wasn't her fault. And then she got in the car and she left. All right. Apparently, these people who were Yiddish people, these people, not very high standards, but they were amazed. They didn't expect anything like this. They expected it to be a give and take. They expected a shakalavataria. They're going to dish out abuse, and of course they're going to receive abuse, and that's not what they got. They dished it out, but she just accepted everything without a problem. This made them research who exactly is this lady. They had her name, apparently, from the incident, so they wanted to see who is this Mrs. Feinstein. So they went ahead and they researched it, and they found out who she is, and they found out about Reb Reuven, and they found out about the yeshiva, and they enrolled their child in the yeshiva. This was a family, the furthest type of family that you would have thought is going to send their child to Yeshiva Staten Island. But they were so amazed by the way she comported herself that they said, this is where we want our child to go to yeshiva. And they begged the yeshiva to accept the child, and the yeshiva did. So we're all teachers. Every one of us is a teacher, whether we like it or not. And that's why the Anshe Knesset Sagdola said, Ha'amidu Talmidim Harbe. Every one of us has the chance. We all interact in our jobs, in our families, in our shuls. We all interact with many, 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 many people. And we all have the opportunity to be Maimed Talmidim Harbe. So this is not something that was just said to Magid Shir. This is something that was said to each and every one of us. Okay. B'shus Tamar D'Asra, we're continuing our Dirshu Bahalacha. Hopefully today we're going to catch up. Before I start going weiter, by the same Sheva Brachas that I was at today, I had the opportunity. I was sitting with Rabbi Mintz and Reb Ruven. So I asked Reb Ruven, I said, what does the Rebbe say about plunging a toilet on Shabbos? So he told me, he says, it's an interesting thing. If you look in the tshuva, my father seems iffy about it and maybe not so happy with it. But somebody asks me to shaila, I tell him it's mutter because we did it. We did it at home. If the toilet was stuffed, we plunged it. So my father had no problem with it. So tshuva notwithstanding, he said, I paskin that it's mutter. He says, my brother, Reb David, my brother's not so happy with it. Okay. I turned to Rabbi Mintz, and I asked Rabbi Mintz, I said, I heard in the Rebbe's name that the Rebbe has a psak from the Yeshiva Zatzal, that it's mutter. So he told me yes. He says, I asked Rav Moshe, and he told me it's mutter, and he told me why. He says, he told me that you clear the blockage, it's not a maisa umen. Nobody calls a plumber to plunge a toilet. If something's wrong, if there's a heavy, so you need a snake, but to plunge a toilet, nobody calls a plumber to plunge a toilet. So it's not a maisa umen. And the house is not worth less before the toilet is plunged. It's not worth more after the toilet is plunged. There's no monetary value to it. He said between those two svaras, Rav Moshe said this is not called a tikkun, and it's mutter. So here we have the psak. So that's as far as psak halacha, that's the psak that I have. You don't need an umen. You don't need an umen. Nobody calls an umen to do it. But that's called not a maisa umen. If any yukkel could do it, that's not a maisa umen. A maisa umen is jumping a car, boosting a car is not a maisa umen. Changing the battery is a maisa umen. Changing the battery, I could change the battery. I've changed the battery many times. But the hamoinam goes to the mechanic to change the battery. They don't do it themselves. So that's a maisa umen. But boosting is not a maisa umen. Of schita on the plunging? No, what would be schita? No, not at all. Especially it's even submerged. You're not squeezing anything out of it. You're not squeezing water out of the tissues. They're in the water. So there's no. Schita is not a show. Okay, so that's as far as yesterday's. So now let's go weiter. We didn't finish off the Mishnah Berurah from yesterday. We have a small piece of Mishnah Berurah. We're holding on Kuf Pei Beis Amud Aleph in Ois Katan Nun Zayin. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 lines into Ois Katan Nun Zayin. Betzalim shedarkon lehishtaresh ba'aliyah sheyesh by ofar. We have to remember, what? Where are we? We're in Shin Lamed Vav, Sif Yud Beis. We're in the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Nun Zayin. And we're a little bit 4 lines into the Mishnah Berurah. We have to remember that in houses in past days, they did a lot of storage, especially when it comes to vegetables. We are so spoiled, it's ridiculous. We could get a tomato anytime we want, we get an onion anytime we want. Whatever we want, we get it whenever we want it. That wasn't the case not all that long ago. So they used storage, they stored produce down in the cellar or up in the attic. So apparently sometimes they would store onions and there would be earth on the floor in the cellar or in the attic. and sometimes the onions would take root, and they would root in the ground in the attic. So, onions, where it's the derech that they will sometimes take root in the earth that's up in the attic, and indeed they took root, and you wanted to take root. I'm not 100% clear why you wanted to take root, but in the case that you wanted it to take root, somebody would uproot it, is chayiv, that would be toilish daraisa, even though this onion, usually the bulb of the onion is submerged. But we know you have onions sitting around for a long time, sometimes they start sprouting. So the onion can actually take root, even though the bulb is above the ground, it could put out roots and it could take root. So the Mishnah Berurah is pointing out that since you wanted to take root, and it did take root, now to be toilish it would be toilish daraisa, even though that's not the derech of how they normally grow. Aval, im nafla alein mapilis, let's say a house collapsed, or a shed, a storage shed, collapsed, and it landed on top of a sack of onions. V'niskasu ha'imoi shalabetzalim, and the actual bulbs are now covered over by dirt. V'ha'olin megulin kederech gidulan, and the leaves coming out of the bulbs are exposed, which is exactly the normal way that onions grow. V'nishtarshu sham, so it took root and it's growing. Then afilu eina roitzer b'ashar shasan, even if you did not want it to take root, chayiv, it would be an isser of toilish daraisa to uproot them. K'moishe mihoyin tun basada, the same way it would be if they were growing in the field, because they're growing in exactly the normal way. They're completely covered. In the first case, they're not growing in the normal way. But since you want it to take root, that's considered toilish daraisa. Okay. Now, we have one more ois nun ches. So the Mechaber had said that if the fruit is dried up and the fruits are not, or if the fruits are dried up and the tree is not, either way, removing something from the tree is considered oikadav migidulai, and you would be chayav for toilish daraisa. Even though the Mechaber said at the end of Sif Yud Beis, even though shem akakurim le'inyan tuma, even though from the perspective of dinei tuma and tahara, these fruits would be considered separated from the tree. The Mishnah Berurah says in Eisnun Ches Linyan Tuma Pirish Tumas Eichlin. When it comes to the laws of Tumas Eichlin, of foods being Makabel Tuma, the Loi Makabeli Tuma b'Mechuber v'Zeh Choshev Ketolush. Normally, a fruit cannot be Makabel Tuma as long as it's attached to a tree. It cannot contract Tuma. From the halachas of Hilchas Tuma, once the tree is dried up, the fruit that's still connected to that tree is going to be considered tolush. It's going to be considered separated from the tree, and it could be makabel tuma. Yet, when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, we consider it attached to the tree, and to remove it would be tolush daraisa. Okay. Now we go to Sif Yud Gimel, which is very interesting, and it's Negei Lamaisa as well. The Mechaber says, Aser lehishtamesh bitstadei ha'ilan. Now, I have to warn you that, like the Chavetz Chaim is going to say in the Mishnah Berurah, the wording of the Mechaber over here is a little bit imprecise. The wording is a little bit choppy, the phraseology. So I'm going to read the Mechaber the way it's going to be explained by the Mishnah Berurah. Aser lehishtamesh bitstadei ha'ilan. You are not allowed to make use of something that is attached to a tree. Now, literally, tzadei ha'ilan means the sides of a tree. As the Mishnah Berurah will point out, you are certainly not allowed to be mishtamish, to use the side of a tree, because the side of a tree is a tree, and you're not allowed to be mishtamish be'ilan. There's no chiddush in that. What the Mechaber is saying over here is, Asar le'ishtamish b'tzadei ha'ilan, we call tzadei ha'ilan anything that is attached to a tree. So, for instance, if you took an eye and you screwed an eye into a tree, that eye is called stadei ha'ilan. If you now want to come on Shabbos and you want to hang something from a hook on that eye, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos, because that is being mishtamish b'tzadei ha'ilan. You're being mishtamish with something attached to a tree. The Mechaber continues, Aval b'tzidei tzadin mutter. If you want to be mishtamish, you want to make use of something that is attached to something that is attached to the tree, that you're allowed to do. So here's a very practical nafkamina. Let's say you're up in the country, it's not so common here anymore, and you have a clothesline. So you have a clothesline that's tied around the tree, right? That's called stadei ha'ilon. That clothesline is something which is attached to a tree. You're not allowed to use that clothesline. So you cannot hang up something on that clothesline on Shabbos. However, if you had an eye screwed into the tree, and you had a clothesline tied to the eye, then you can use the clothesline. Because then the eye is stadei ha'ilon. That you're not allowed to use. The rope, the clothesline, is tzidei stadin. So the clothesline then you would be allowed to use. Same thing. Same thing. If you have a swing, so you have a rope that's tied to the tree, right? So, what? The branch part of the tree. So if you have a rope that's tied to the branch, right, and the swing is hanging from that rope, can't use it. Because even though you'll tell me that the swing is tzidei stadin, but you're using the rope. You're using the rope. You're swinging with the rope. So I think the swing would be usher. However, if you have two eyes screwed into the tree, and now the swing is hanging from the eyes, that's no problem. Or what people do is they screw a piece of wood into the tree, and they hang the swing from the tree. That's no problem. So now let's see the mechaber further. Avo b'tzidei stadin mutter. To use something attached to something that's attached to the tree, that's a mutter. Lefikach, therefore, and here we have to be very careful with the wording of the mechaber. Lefikach, therefore, aser lismay chasulam litzidei ha'ilon. You are not allowed to lean a ladder onto the side of a tree. Over here, the word tzidei does not mean onto something attached to the tree. It means to the tree. You're not allowed to lean a ladder onto a tree, even on Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos you come, and you put a ladder, and you lean it on the tree. And now on Shabbos, you want to go up the ladder. You're not allowed to do that. Because what's the tree? What's the ladder? The ladder is now stadei ha'ilon. The ladder is something that's leaning on the tree. So even though it's not attached, it's being supported by the tree. You're not allowed to be mishtamish with something that's supported by a tree or attached to a tree on Shabbos. So even if you did this on Erev Shabbos, on Shabbos you would not be allowed to go up the ladder. If you did it on Shabbos, if you wanted to come on Shabbos and lean the ladder on the tree, that would definitely be usher. Because when you lean the ladder on the tree on Shabbos, you're using the tree. So if you do it on Shabbos, that's also because it's called being mishtamish be'ilon. You're using the tree. If you put the ladder there on Erev Shabbos and you want to go up the ladder on Shabbos, that's also because it's called being mishtamish b'tzadei ilon, which is also also. So lefikach, also lismar chasulam l'tzidei ilon, you're not allowed to lean a ladder on the side of a tree. Why? The chisalik bay, because when you go up the ladder, mishtamish b'tzadin, you're being mishtamish b'tzadei ilon. Again, that's if you set it up on Erev Shabbos. If you set it up on Shabbos, you're being mishtamish b'ilon. Avo, im yesh yasei tekua b'tzidei ilon, if you have a piece of wood, you have a peg that's driven into the tree, mutter lismar sulam alav. Now you would be allowed to come on Erev Shabbos. You could lean the ladder on the peg that's attached to the tree, and then you could go up the ladder on Shabbos, because the peg is stadei ilon, which is aser. The ladder that's leaning on the peg is stadei stadin. So on Shabbos to go up the ladder is being mishtamish b'tzadei stadin, which is mutter. But if you want to lean the ladder on the peg on Shabbos, that would be aser. Because by leaning the ladder on the peg, you're being mishtamish b'tzadei ilon. You're being mishtamish with the peg. And that you're not allowed to do. The havele yoseit studin, the peg is stadei ilan, v'sulam tzidei studin, and the ladder is tzidei studin. I'm going to stop here for a second, and let's go down into the Mishnah Berurah. Kids want to play in a, well, no, that's usher. That would be usher because of climbing up the tree. That's considered you're climbing up the tree. You're not allowed to climb up a tree in Shabbos. You're not allowed to go on a tree. What? You're not allowed to go up it. You're not allowed to go on the tree in Shabbos. When you're on a tree house, you're supported by the tree. You're not allowed to go up on a tree in Shabbos. Okay. Yes, the Gemara does. Right, and Shabbos is a problem.
And Yom Tov it's not?
No. So, no, it depends. It's a sugya over there in Sukkah. So I'm not going to comment. It's a sugya in Sukkah. But yeah, it's complicated what you can do and what you can't do. Depends how it's built, how much of it is supported by the tree, how much of it is not supported by the tree. It's a whole sugya. Okay, so Shir Lamed Vav, Sif Yud Gimel, we're going into the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Nun Tes, B'Tstadei Ilan. Pirush, Chavetz Chaim says, what is called Stadei Ilan? Pirush, Davar hatachuv aikasher be'ilan, mikreit stadei ha'ilan. Anything that is driven into the tree or tied to the tree or otherwise attached to the tree, that's called stadei ha'ilan. And the Mechaber says, you're not allowed to be mishtamish, but stadei ha'ilan. Aval defanei ha'ilan atzmai, but the sides of the tree itself, loy mikreit stadin, that's not called stadei ha'ilan. Elagufa ilanhu, that's the actual tree. V'tzidei tzadin, what are tzidei tzadin that you're allowed to use on Shabbos? Hu davar hanishan bedavar hatachav be'ilan. That's something which is either attached to or is supported by something which is attached to the tree. So again, the eye that you screw into the tree, that's stadei ilan. The clothesline that you attach to the eye, that's stadei tzadin. V'chein mispar b'divrei ha'mechaber l'kamei, and this is what the Mechaber is going to explain as we go further. Ais kat and samach. Also, lispar chasulam. You're not allowed to lean the tree. What does this mean? Says the Chavetz Chaim. Ein aloshan meduktuk. The language, the phraseology of the Mechaber over here is not precise. V'shir advarim, and really what the word should be saying is, De'ein lismar sulam le'ilan. You're not allowed to lean a ladder onto a tree directly. May Erev Shabbos, even on Erev Shabbos, la'aloi salav b'Shabbos, to go up the ladder on Shabbos. Dechisalik bay, because if you lean the ladder on the tree on Shabbos, so then the ladder becomes stadei ha'ilan. Now when you go up the tree on Shabbos, up the ladder on Shabbos, you're being mishtamish b'tstadei ha'ilan, which is aser. V'lismai chasulam b'Shabbos bevadai aser. To lean the ladder on the tree on Shabbos is certainly aser, because then you're being mishtamish b'ilan. You're not being mishtamish b'tstadei ha'ilan. By leaning the ladder on the tree, you're using the tree. So then you're being mishtamish b'ilan. Afilu einoi samchai be'ilan gufa, even if you wouldn't lean the ladder on the tree itself, rak ala yosei atakua boy. So on Shabbos, even if you have a board screwed to the tree, and now on Shabbos you want to lean the ladder on the board, that would be aser. Because by leaning the ladder on the board, you're being mishtamish with the board. And the board is stadei ha'ilan. You're not allowed to do it. The zeu gufa mishtamish but stadei ha'ilan mikri. By leaning the ladder on the board, that's called being mishtamish but stadei ha'ilan. However, if the ladder would already be set up leaning on the board before Shabbos, then you could go up on the ladder. Because now it's not called that you're being mishtamish with the board, with the stadei ha'ilan. That you did on Erev Shabbos. You supported the ladder by the board on Erev Shabbos. When you go up the ladder, you're being mishtamish with the ladder. The ladder is tzidei tzadin. So that would be mutter. Samach Aleph, l'tzidei ha'ilan. The Mechaber had said, you're not allowed to lean the ladder on tzidei ha'ilan. So he pointed out that when the Mechaber says tzidei ha'ilan over there, pirush ledafnoi. Over there he meant you're not allowed to lean the ladder on the tree itself. Okay, Ois Kat and Samach Beis. If you have a board that's driven into the tree or attached to the tree, and you supported the ladder with the board before Shabbos, mutter lismoich. What this you're allowed to do, says the Chavetz Chaim, Hainu, the mutter lismoich sulam erev Shabbos, you're allowed to set this up on erev Shabbos, like we explained, la'alis alav b'Shabbos, to go up the ladder on Shabbos, mishum dahava le'yoseid, because the yoseid is now stadei ilan, and the ladder is tzidei stadin. However, the Chavetz Chaim points out that when you go up this ladder, Yizar shelo yanyak raglai ala yoseid. You have to be careful that when you're going up this ladder that's supported by this peg or by this board that's attached to the tree, make sure that when you climb up the ladder, you don't accidentally put your foot on the board or on the peg, because that would be usher. Ella al shlavei asulam. You have to make sure that you only put your foot on the rungs of the ladder. Kedei shelo yehei mishtamish b'tzadin, so you should not come to be mishtamish b'tzadei ilan, which is usher. Okay, the Mechaber gives us another example of this. Second line from the bottom. V'im na'atz by yoseid. If you drove a peg into the tree, v'toila by kalkala, and you hung a basket from the eye, hayoseid nikrat stadin, the peg or the eye that's driven into the tree is called stadei ilan, which you're not allowed to make use of. V'akalkala ketzidei stadin, and the basket is tzidei stadin. And therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah in Ois Cotton Samach Gimel on the bottom line, V'akalkala ketzidei stadin. The basket is tzidei stadin. Lefikach, therefore, mutar lahaniach by peiros v'litoil. So now you're allowed to put peiros, you're allowed to put produce into the basket, and you're allowed to take stuff out of the basket. V'litoil mimena. You turn the page to Kuf Pei Beis on the base. You're allowed to put in produce to take out. Aval akalkala atzma. But the basket itself, Aser litla a litlais biyaseid. You would not be allowed to remove the basket from the peg or hang the basket back on the peg, because then you're making use of the peg, and the peg is stadei ilan, which is aser lehishtamish bayan Shabbos. The chanal, gabi sulam, just like we saw by the tree. Says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, v'makalkala tali beilan atzmai. If the basket would be hanging directly from a branch of the tree. Oh, Elise. Yeah. Perfect. All right. I'm sorry, but even though Isaac b'mitzvah potter ben mitzvah, but I'm just what? Priyas bal chayv is mitzvah. I'm saying Isaac b'mitzvah potter ben mitzvah, but if I have the opportunity to do priyas bal chayv, I'm doing it, and the check is supposed to be here. No, this is not it. No, one second. I know I put it in my. I know I wrote it out, and I put it in here. It has to be here. Oh, come on. If I put it in here. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. All right, no, it must. If it's not here, it must be sitting on my desk at home. My apologies. All right, I thought I'd get to give it to you and cross it off. Okay, weiter. All right. So the Mishnah Berurah said here, "Emakalkala tali b'ilan atzma." If the basket is hanging on the tree itself, also lital chayvetz mimena. You're not allowed to take anything out of the basket. V'chein litel l'soicha, or to put anything in the basket. The kamish tamish b'tzadin, because now the basket has become stadei ilan. The basket is attached or hanging directly from the tree, so you can't make use of the basket. Says the Chavetz Chaim weiter, "V'impi hakalkala tsar." If the opening of the basket is narrow, tekeshenoitel chayvetz mina kalkala meinid ha'ilan. So that in order to get something out of the basket, you've got to pull it out of the basket. And by putting pressure on the basket, you're going to move the tree. Then aser b'chol inyan. Then even if the basket is attached to an eye or to a peg, if you're going to move the tree, then it's aser. Because now you're being metaltal of the tree. That you're not allowed to do. Now another halacha that the Mishnah Berurah squeezes in here. Ulehi sha'ein be'ilan. How about leaning on a tree on Shabbos? Going for a walk, you're tired, you want to lean on a tree. Im ha'adam bari, if you're talking about a healthy person, says the Mishnah Berurah, mutter, then it's allowable. The tashkayach, but if it's a weak person, aser, then it's forbidden. V'atam, what's the reason? The adam bari, a healthy person, einoi soymach alav elama'at. When a healthy person leans on a tree, he doesn't generally lean his whole weight on the tree. He rugs up for a second, he leans on the tree, but he's really supporting himself. V'loi mikri mishtamish b'mechuber. That's not called making use of the tree. Aval tash koichai, but a weak person who has got a pashut lean on the tree to support himself, tzarech lismaich b'chol koichai alav. He's resting on it with his full weight. Umikri mishtamish b'mechuber v'aser. And that would be called using the mechuber, which is aser. V'hadi miliki she'enoi menidoi. Points to Chavetz Chaim out. This is only with the healthy person that it's mutter. That's only if you're not moving the tree. Aval kishe menidoi. But if it's a sapling and you're going to move the tree, afilu b'bori aser. Then even a healthy person who's not leaning his whole weight on the tree is aser. Tezeh gufa shimashu, because that in itself is making use of the tree.
Why can't you use a tree on Shabbos?
It's exera because if you come to use the tree, you might come to climb up the tree and pick something from the tree.
So you're talking about this outer cocker over there, then he needs to honeycomb.
Right, so why are you worried that he's going to pick?
Climbing the tree, and the body is not going to do it because it's only using
No, but that's, but the biggest, but you have to remember that the gzera even applies to a non-fruit bearing tree. It's a light plug. Once we have the gzera, we have the gzera. I'm saying, so the gzera is gzera, it applies to everybody equally.
But I don't understand, they should apply to the guy also. What do you mean if he's using a half...
That's not called being mechuber. It's not called being mishtamish. You're not using the tree. If you're a healthy person, that's not called, the isser is being mishtamish b'ilan. You're not being mishtamish.
What is he leaving for? He shouldn't do it. If he doesn't,
Yeah.
he's not using it. So what's he
Okay.
doing?
You want to be chelik on the Shulchan
It's
Aruch.
like saying you're half pregnant, Yeah, you're pregnant, you're not. What is it?
Haggah, says the Rambam at the bottom of Kufkei Beis Amud Aleph, last few words, Haggah, umuter liga ba'ilon. You're allowed to touch a tree on Shabbos. U'levad shelo yinidenu, as long as you don't move it. And now the Ramah squeezes in another interesting halacha here. Bar amoik, a deep pit. Afilu mei amos, even if it's 100 amos deep. Muter lereid v'lalois. You're allowed to go down into the pit. You're allowed to come up out of the pit. Umetapes v'yored, you could climb down. Umetapes v'oila, you could climb up. V'loich haishinon shemiyaka karka b'yiridasai v'aliyasai. And we're not afraid, we don't make a gzera that perhaps by climbing down into the pit, climbing up out of the pit, you're going to come to be mashve gumois. You're going to dig holes with your feet in the earth. You're going to fill them. You're making a face, right? What's going on here? So I'm not going to get deep into it, but it's a funny Ramah. This Ramah is based on a Gemara in Eruvin on Kuf Amud Aleph. The problem over here was that the Gemara in Eruvin tells us two halachas. The Gemara in Eruvin says you're not allowed to climb up a tree on Shabbos, but you are allowed to climb down a pit. So Rashi says that what was at work here was as follows. When the Gemara said that you're not allowed to climb up a tree on Shabbos, somebody may have been tempted to say, why aren't you allowed to climb up a tree on Shabbos? Must be because it's Tirchi Yisera. Climbing is not a Shabbos activity. It's Tirchi Yisera, it's of the Dechoil. It's not something you should be doing on Shabbos. If that would be true, then climbing down into a pit, climbing up out of a pit, would also be usher. So Rashi says that the kavanah of the Gemara, when the Gemara said that you're allowed to climb down a pit and climb up a pit, was to tell you, don't think that the reason for the Isser of climbing a tree on Shabbos is Tirchi Yisera. No, the Isser of the tree is Gzera Shema Yalav Yitloish. And should you think that, if we made Gzera Shema Yalav Yitloish, maybe we'll also make Gzera on a pit, Shema Yorid, and he'll make holes in the earth, and he'll come to be Mashveh Gumais. No, that Gzera we didn't make. And from that comes this Ramah.
First of all, how is he going up and down the boat?
He's climbing. I don't know exactly what he's doing.
Does he have a ladder there? What does he have?
No, so the Gemara says metapes.
He's climbing without it?
Right, the Gemara says metapes.
pushing with his hand.
The impression is that he's climbing on the walls. Metapes means to climb. So I think that's what it means. So there would be room, you would think that there might be room to make such a gzera, but there isn't.
He's not worried about that he's moving up from.
No.
It's going to happen.
I'm saying, but we're saying that we don't make such a gzera. We say that we don't make such a gzera.
It's only in your house. What you're worried about.
So let's.
The pitch you're not worried about.
So you know what? Shin Lam and Zion. We're going to go into this right now. Siman Shin Lam and Zion. So we finished Baruch Hashem. We finished Shin Lam and Vav. Let's go into Shin Lam and Zion. Din kibud abayis v'davar she'ein miskavein boydal seifim. Here we have the laws regarding sweeping up a house and other laws regarding a davar she'ein miskavein. When you do a malacha without intent, your intent is to accomplish something else, and incidentally you do a malacha that's asur on Shabbos. So before we even start the mechaber, we're going to go back down into the Mishnah Berurah, where we just left off the Mishnah Berurah. There's no ice here, but the Mishnah Berurah says, Akdim l'simin zeh. It's about halfway down the Mishnah Berurah, between the top of the Mishnah Berurah and where the Aleph is for Sif Katan Aleph. Akdim l'simin zeh, Hagdama Kitzara. Chavetz Chaim says, I'm going to give a little preface for the Siman and Shulchan Aruch that we're about to learn. Vihi, and this Hagdama is, Chayreish hu echad milamites avis malachis. One of the 39 forbidden malachis is chayrish plowing. V'kevon chekavanas ha'chayrish l'rapuye ara, since the intent of plowing is to soften and improve the ground, the earth, for planting. Da'oz toiv l'zriya. Why do you want to loosen the earth? Why do you want to soften it? Because that makes it more conducive for planting. V'gam kavanosai lahashvais hagumais. You also have intent when you plow to fill up holes in the ground. Uli apoisai, and to improve the ground. Kidei sheyeh hamokim shaveh. You want it to be level. You want your furrows to be nice and level, so you have a level area for planting. V'lachein, therefore, ha'chofer basadeh, somebody who digs a hole in a field, oisha asachritz, or he makes a ditch in the ground, oisha hayasham tail katan, or if there was a mound in the field, v'hishpilai, and he lowered it to make it level, oisha hayasham makam namuch, or there was an indentation, there was a sink in the ground, v'hishva isai, and you built it up to make it level. Or similarly, anybody who fills up a hole in a piece of earth which is suitable for planting, in all of these cases, chayiv mishum chayrish, you are chayiv for the malacha of plowing. All of these would be an issa d'oraisa, a tolda, or the av malacha of chayrish. And if you did this in the house, if you had an earthen floor in a house, and you filled up a hole in the house, or you leveled the ground in the house, chayiv mishum boine. Over there, it wouldn't be an isser of chayrish, it would be an isser of building, of boine. Because by doing this, you're fixing the floor. So that would be an isser of boine. Anything that you do to improve ground, hu teledes chayrish, that is a tolda of chayrish, because again, the intent of chayrish is to improve the ground. So the chayiv b'kol shehu, and you're chayiv for a doraisa in the most minute amount, and this is brought from the Rambam. Now let's go to the mechaber. Sif Aleph. Davar she'ein miskaven mutter. A davar she'ein miskaven is mutter. Davar she'ein miskaven. When you do a malacha incidentally, that's not your intent. Your intent is to accomplish something else. So like we're going to see, you're dragging a bench. You're dragging a bench, you might make a chritz. You might make a furrow in the ground by dragging the bench. You don't want to make a furrow in the ground. You're not interested in making a furrow in the ground. You just want to move the bench. But you're doing the halacha, you're doing the malacha incidentally without intent. So a davar she'ein miskaven mutter, generally speaking, a davar she'ein miskaven is mutter. However, for who shelo yehei psik reisha, it's mutter as long as it's not a situation of a psik reisha. What's a psik reisha? So psik reisha literally means cutting off the head. You cut the head off a chicken, the chicken must die. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There's no area of doubt. There's no gray area. It's black and white. Cut that off the chicken, definitely dies. So if it's a psik reisha, if dragging the bench is 1,000% going to make a chritz, then you have a problem. But if it's 78% going to make a chritz, right? So even though it's most likely going to make a chritz, that's not psik reisha. The chicken is not most likely going to die. The chicken's going to die. So the Mechaber says, Darish and Miskaven is generally mutter, as long as it's not a psik reisha. Hilkach, therefore, says the Mechaber, Geirer Adam Mita Kisev Sasel, you're allowed to drag a bed, a chair, or a bench, Bein Gedolim Bein Ktanim, whether they're big or whether they're small, or Belvad Shal Yiskavein Lasis Chritz, as long as your intent is not to make a chritz. If your intent is to make a furrow in the ground, then of course it's chayrish, you're not allowed to do it. Furthermore, says the Mechaber, Umutter l'rabetz habayis, you're allowed to take water and spray water on the ground in the house in order to take down the dust. You have dust coming up in the house, you want to get it out of the air, you want to push the dust down, you're allowed to spray water to put down the dust. Even though sometimes this has the effect of leveling out an earthen floor, that's not your kavanah. You have no intent to do that. All you want to do is put down the dust. And it's not a psik reisha that you're going to be mashra gumais, so therefore you're allowed to do it. Says the Chavetz Chaim, says the Mishnah Berurah, Eis Katan Aleph. Davar she'ein miskaven. Zeh Lashon HaRambam. These are the words of the Rambam. Devarim hamutarin la'asaisan b'Shabbos. Acts that are mutter to do on Shabbos. Ubishas asiyasan, but at the time that you do them, efshir sheteyasa beglalon malacha acheres, it's possible that a different malacha will happen. So it's perfectly mutter to move a bench on Shabbos, but it's possible that you might do chayrish, you might make a chritz. Ve'efshir shaloi teyasa, but it's also possible that the forbidden malacha will not happen. If you don't have intent to do that malacha, if you don't have intent to do chayrish, mutter, it's mutter. And that's what the Mechaber is saying. However, the Mechaber says it's mutter as long as it's not a psik reisha. Ice cut and base psik reisha. Perish, what's the definition of psik reisha? Shebevadai teyasa malacha acheres. If the forbidden malacha will certainly happen by virtue of you doing the permitted act, then you're not allowed to do it. Then it's psik reisha. Says the Mechaber is cut and gimel. I so much want to finish. Definite is 100, like the chicken.
So if you have 80%?
Let's go weiter. Let's see. Hilkach, ice cut and gimel. Hilkach, therefore, he says you're allowed to drag a chair or a bench. Ben tan big doilim. Hilkach pirish. Kevan the davar she'ein miskaven mutter. Since the davar she'ein miskaven is mutter, hilkach gur. Therefore, you're allowed to drag the bench. Da'af al gav de bigri rasai. Matsui she'yasa charitzim. Even though, by virtue of dragging the bench, it is common that you're going to make a charitz, bakarka, ve'ika bezemisham chash chayfer. Do telada the chayrish. So there is a worry that you might accomplish digging, you might accomplish making a ditch, which is a tel of chayrish, afilu hachi, lav psik reishahu. It's not a psik reisha. Afilu bekarka she'ena merutzefes. Even if we're talking about loose dirt where there are no tiles, there's no paving, there's no stones over it, it's just bare earth, still you're allowed to do it. The efshir shapir shaloi takritz bakarka, because it's also possible that you won't make a chritz. It's possible you will make a chritz. It's possible you won't make a chritz. Bein gedolim, the Mechaber said you're allowed to do this whether they're big or whether they're small. Now this is a very interesting Mishnah Berurah. This Mishnah Berurah caught me off guard. Bein gedolim meiktanim, the Chavetz Chaim says that there's an incidental chiddush here. Bein gedolim, whether they're big, the mitrach leili saim al ksefai, so it would be a big tircha to carry the bench, right? So over there, you might think, maybe we're matter you to drag the bench because it would be a big tercha to carry it. Or whether it's a small or lightweight chair. The yakali kakem aksefai, where really you could pick it up and carry it. Afilu haki mutalay legaram alaretz. We're not mechayiv you to pick it up, whether it's big, whether it's small. You don't got to go out of your way. You're allowed to drag it. However, kasav amagan avram, the gdolim biyoser, a very big, heavy chair or bench, Also ligrar al haaretz, that you're not allowed to drag the psik reishu the bavadi yasachritz. If you're talking about a big, heavy bench, one of those benches with a concrete slab on top, with metal legs, you're going to drag that, you're certainly going to make a chritz. That's a psik reisha that you're not allowed to do. And get a load of this. Va'afilu merutzif bekarka shel shayish, even if the area that you're dragging it on is paved, still also ligrar. You're not allowed to drag the bench. The gazrin on merutzif atuena merutzif, because there's a gzera that even though over here you're not going to make a chritz, it's paved. Still, there's a gzera, you're not allowed to do it. The Shar Tzion, just the first line and a half of the Shar Tzion in the first column, ois cotton bays, a little more than halfway down. Umistabra, however, says the Chavetz Chaim, it makes sense to say the imkol ha'ir merutzef ba'avonim. If we're talking about what we have, all of the sidewalks are paved. If we're talking about such a situation, I'd be crushing. Sometimes they put down wood planks. Yesh lahakil bazeh. Then there's room to be makel that we're not going to make this gzera of merutzif atoeina merutzif. So you want to drag a big heavy bench outside on the sidewalk, even though it's a bench that would be a psik reisha if you dragged it on the ground. I don't think we're going to make a gzera over here merutzif atoeina merutzif because all of our sidewalks are paved.
Except the lawn.
That's a lawn if you're doing it in the backyard.
People walk from the lawn all the time.
Right, but what I'm thinking is that obviously the Shar Tzion did not mean that every square foot of the town is paved. But no, he doesn't mean that. There's no such thing. There's no such
You go
thing.
to Europe, you see the houses, and between the houses you got to
Right, Borough Park. You don't got to go to Europe, Borough Park.
You don't have a, how do you call it?
But you have yards. People have little yards.
You don't need, that's a back, it's closed, it's another thing. Over here we have open.
I don't know. I didn't ask a
We
person,
have
but
open lawn.
my impression.
Anyways, the Rabbi
Yeah.
didn't answer it.